Welcome to IVF This, episode 179, IVF and Cognitive Distortions. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well. You might have heard from the intro. I'm still taken aback. Frankly, it's insanity to me that we're almost 180 episodes into this podcast. It's just, I owe so much to you guys for showing up and supporting me and listening and applying what you're learning, and just all of the love that I receive from you guys, and the support that I receive from you guys, and the reassurances that I receive from you guys that this is helpful. This is kind of the only podcast out there that touches much more so on the mental and emotional impacts of IVF rather than like the physical or medical side of IVF. So if you know someone who's going through infertility, maybe they're just kind of considering IVF, or someone who's been through the gauntlets of multiple IVF cycles, please remind them that the science and the medicine and the medical part of IVF it's a massive part of, especially the IVF process. I mean, the IVF process in and of itself is a medical procedure, multiple medical procedures, but that's not the only part, and that their mental and emotional health during this process is paramount, just as paramount to success as any of the other parts. So thank you for being here. I hope you share. I hope you bring other IVFers into the fold with us. Now, I hope you're doing well today, but we're going to be diving into something that is general to everyone. It's kind of a universal experience of our brains, but I'm going to speak to it specifically within the lens and within the context of IVF and fertility, right? We're talking about cognitive distortions. Now, I've talked about cognitive distortions. I've written a few podcast episodes on specific cognitive distortions. Black and white thinking is one. It was kind of towards the first 20, 25 episodes of the podcast I did. Another one is catastrophizing, which is also a cognitive distortion. But this is the first time that I've ever actually laid out all of the different types of cognitive distortions, which there are, I think, like 15, or at least we'll know in just a minute because I did number them. But what I want to focus on today is highlighting just a handful, right? I think I highlight about 7, which is half of all the cognitive distortions. It doesn't mean that you won't experience the other types of cognitive distortions that I don't specifically highlight and provide examples for, because we all experience every cognitive distortion throughout our entire lives, right? We're not specific to 1 or 2 types. We probably rely on 1 or 2 types more often than others. But we are susceptible to cognitive distortions through all manner of our lives, right? So cognitive distortions are these little mental gremlins that sneak in and kind of mess up how we see ourselves, our journey, our future, our life, all of it. So those moments when one comment or one setbacks makes it feel like your entire world is crumbling? Or when your brain starts telling you that everything is hopeless, even when that's not really, really true? Those are cognitive distortions. Those thoughts that feel really true, and sometimes they're even protective, but most of the time they're just old thought patterns that we use to kind of keep ourselves safe. Those little things that can keep us from hurting. Right? So today we're going to name them. I talk about naming it to tame it all the time, because when you can name a cognitive distortion, you can tame it, right? You can interrupt the thought pattern. You can bring a little compassion and a whole hell of a lot of clarity. So what are cognitive distortions exactly? They are automatic thought patterns, like mental shortcuts, right? That your brain uses to kind of make sense of things.
But instead of helping, they often make things harder. These thoughts are usually, generally, negative in nature, often exaggerated, and distorted views or versions of our reality. So imagine your brain has this pair of cloudy, smudged up, nasty glasses, right? Everything it sees is filtered through shame, fear, or doubt. That's what cognitive distortions do. They don't show you the full picture. They just show you the scariest, harshest version of whatever story is going on for you, right? And listen. I'm always going to love up on our brains. I'm always going to love up on our minds because they're not, our minds are not doing this to be mean. It genuinely, and I mean genuinely, is trying to protect you. It's trying to prepare you for danger or disappointment. But when you're going through something as emotionally intense as infertility or IVF, those distortions tend to get louder, more frequent, are less easy to control or ignore. They just kind of start running the show. And that's why we need to notice them. That's why this whole podcast episode exists. Because once you can see them clearly, even a fraction of the time, you can start to talk back to yourself. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you've probably heard me say you need to talk to yourself more and listen to yourself less. This is what I'm talking about. You can start to talk back, start to argue or challenge some of these cognitive distortions. The cognitive distortions are when you're just talking to yourself, right? When you're just listening to what's happening in your brain and just kind of taking it with oh yeah, I guess that sucks, but I guess that's the way it is. When you challenge them, when you can see it for what it is, when you can challenge those thoughts, that's when you're talking back, right? So you can say something like, I see what you're doing, brain, you clever little thing. We don't have to go down that road today, right? Or whatever version of that feels the most authentic to you. So again, I'm going to share with you the most common cognitive distortions and I'm going to highlight the ones that we see or appear most often within our community. So I have 15 types of cognitive distortions that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I'm just going to give you a little blurb on what they are. I don't want to spend all of our time, which I could, on the different types of them. I want to give you concrete examples. So here we go. So the first one is all or nothing thinking. That's black and white thinking. Those terms are interchangeable. I think black and white thinking was what I chose for that specific podcast episode. But it's the idea that everything is either a total success or a total failure, that there is no middle ground, right? It's all or nothing. The second one is overgeneralization, which is believing that because one bad thing happened, it will always happen, or whatever happens for you or to you will be bad. There's the mental filter, which is only focusing on the negative parts of a given situation. There's discounting the positive. That's when you ignore or minimize anything good. This is actually something I work a lot with my clients on when I encourage them to receive compliments, because very often, especially people who are socialized as women, we tend to minimize any compliment that's given to us. I was talking to a dear friend of mine. Her son and my son are very good friends, and we were just talking, and she's such a lovely, beautiful, sweet-natured person. And I told her that. I gave her a what I felt like was a beautiful compliment. And she goes, oh, well, and then she started to break down how that wasn't true. Oh, I'm kind of moody, or you know what, I don't remember exactly what she said. And I remember I grabbed her by the arms and I said, just take the compliment. Just allow yourself to receive that. And so that minimization, that discounting the positive, is something that's so real for us that I don't think we consider it to be a thing. It feels like it's so much embedded in our DNA. Apparently that was a very profound one for me. I didn't realize I was going to go on that diatribe. Anyway, the next one is jumping to conclusions. And those can look like two different things. Those can look like mind reading, which is assuming you know what someone else is thinking. And very often it's not a good thing. Particularly about you, if you believe that someone is oh, they're mad at me or they're angry with me. And I know because I can see it in their face, or I'm reading it through subtext or whatever. Another aspect of jumping to conclusions is fortune telling, which is predicting the future without evidence, something that I think all of us do in IVF in particular. We always jump to predicting the future when we only have part of the information. The next one is magnification or minimization. They're two cognitive distortions, but they're so closely linked that we just add them together. And that's blowing things out of proportion or shrinking the good stuff. Okay. Emotional reasoning is another one. That's believing that because you feel something, it must be true. Should statements. I did a whole podcast episode on this topic, which is called Stop Shoulding on Yourself. But it's the idea that you're holding yourself to these rigid rules that usually start with I should, I need, I have to, those sorts of things. Labeling. Labeling. This is the one that I wanted to give the example, so I'm trying to remember. The next one is labeling, defining yourself by one negative experience, right? You have a negative pregnancy test, I'm a failure. You experience jealousy because maybe a friend of yours is pregnant and you're trying, or something in that vein. And you say to yourself, I'm a terrible friend, or I'm a jealous person. That is what labeling is. The next one is personification, which is taking responsibility for things that are outside of your control, right? Again, that would tie into the negative pregnancy test, I'm a failure. You have a very limited scope of what you're responsible for within the IVF path. You are really responsible for, taking your medications as prescribed, going to your doctor's appointments, trying to treat yourself as carefully, as gently, and as healthily as possible. And outside of that, it's just science and chance and good luck, right? But the idea that a failed cycle means that you're a failure is personification, because you are taking responsibility for something that is outside of your control. Control fallacies. That's when you're thinking that you're either completely powerless or totally responsible. And this is a very common one within IVF, right? You feel at the mercy of the process. You feel at the mercy of the infertility. But in the same vein, you're taking total responsibility, again, for something you don't have control over. The fallacy of fairness. I did an episode on fairness as well. But that's believing that life should be fair and feeling angry when it's not. I think we all know intellectually that life is not fair. There are many unfair things that happen all day, every day, from the history of time through the end of times. That is just the nature of being alive in this world. We're coming to the end, I promise. Blaming, which is blaming others or yourself for anything and everything that goes wrong, not taking responsibility for things, particularly things that you had control over or that you were part of. This one is me. Oh, I don't like to share this one, but always being right. Oh, yeah, I really enjoy that. But it's the idea that you need to prove that you're right, even if it causes conflict, which it has and it does. And we don't need to talk about that one anymore. And then the last one, which is, again, very common, is the heavens reward fallacy, which is expecting that if you suffer or do everything right, you'll be rewarded. Right. So the idea of, I thought this very much, especially in the very first part of our infertility IVF journey, was like, I did all the things you were supposed to do. By the time that I got married, I had a bachelor's degree and my first master's degree. And, we had lived together, and my husband was finishing up his PhD at that time. And it was like, what the hell are you talking about? We're not getting pregnant, that we have infertility. We've done everything right. This comes up a lot with miscarriage and loss. The idea that you've done something, you did everything right. And so leading to this, again, that this kind of coincides with that fairness, that fallacy of fairness. So they all are, like, as you can see, they're all kind of a mixed bag. They all kind of touch on each other. And that's what makes identifying cognitive distortions very, very challenging, because you've got these intricate layers of things just moving through each other bouncing off of each other, weaving themselves within each other. So it can be very challenging. If you've never familiarized yourself with cognitive distortions, identifying them would be nearly impossible, right? So that again is why I wanted to present these to you today, so that you can decide how you want to move forward with this new piece of information. So now that we've got that very long list out of the way, let's walk through some of the ones that I see most often during infertility and IVF. I'm going to give you some examples and maybe even some gentle ways to kind of walk through them. So the all or nothing thinking. So an example of that would be, if this transfer doesn't work, then IVF is never going to work with me, right? If that sounds familiar, it's probably because every single person who's ever gone through IVF or infertility and has experienced disappointment or loss has probably thought something in that same kind of vein before, right? This distortion wants you to believe that if one thing goes wrong, then it's all wrong. But IVF, and this sentence can be used for any of these cognitive distortions. IVF and life is full of nuance. One outcome does not define your entire story. Okay? The next one, which is a personal favorite of mine, is catastrophizing. We talked about it. I didn't name it catastrophizing in the list, but it falls into the list, right? So an example of catastrophizing would be, I think that the medication is going to make me absolutely crazy. I don't know how I'm going to react, but I think I'm going to be an absolute horrible person. I'm just going to be a raging biatch the entire time. That's catastrophizing. The idea that you're going to somehow alienate the people that you love because you're on hormones, which can happen. Like, I'm not saying that I wasn't kind of a horrible person when I was on, but it was never to the degree that I had imagined, which is the kind of hallmark of catastrophizing. It's going to the absolute worst case scenario first, and then seeing everything through that lens of experience, right? So it's just, again, your brain trying to prepare for the worst, but it doesn't really help. In like, preparation is kind of misleading because it usually only ends up creating panic, which isn't helpful in that situation. So I just remind you, like, take a breath. Your story isn't over. It's okay. Discounting the positive. The example would be, sure, I made it through the retrieval, but that doesn't mean I'm strong. Someone says, oh my gosh, you're doing IVF. Gosh, you're so brave. Well, I'm not brave. I just want a kid. That is discounting the positive. There are many people who go through IVF believing that they are not strong. In fact, they tell me this frequently. And I'm like, you're putting your brain, your body, your emotions, your finances, your future on this chopping block. You're just laying it out there and handing the cleaver to someone else. That is the essence, the definition of bravery, right? So if someone tells you that you're brave or that you're strong or that you're amazing going through IVF, I want you to practice this line. I receive that. I receive that. You don't have to agree with it. It's fine. Most of us, when we start trying to practice accepting the positive or accepting compliments and things like that, most of us don't believe it. I know a few years ago when I started saying or thinking I received this, because you don't have to say it out loud. You can just say thank you. But when I started thinking it, when people would tell me things, it was kind of silly to me. But then over time, I actually started to believe those things, because when you say you're receiving it, again, it doesn't mean you necessarily believe it, but you believe that that person believes it. And that's why that's so important. Okay. Mind reading. An example of this would be, they probably think I've waited too long, or someone's going to judge me, or they think ... right? Unless you have a mind reading superpower, in which case, please teach me. You have no idea what other people are thinking. The only way to know what other people are thinking is if they tell you or they write it down for you to read. That's it, right? So we need to dispel ourselves from this mind reading aspect, because most of the time, mind reading, catastrophizing, things like that all go hand in hand. And so you're thinking of the worst possible conclusion or drawing the worst possible conclusion about yourself. And that will only create more pain and more discomfort, right? And let's be honest, even if someone is judging you, this is really none of your business. That is on them. That is a reflection of them and their experiences, their life, their biases, their judgments. All of that is not actually a true reflection of you. The reason I know that is because not everyone has the same opinion of me. That may be a fangirl of the IVF, this podcast. There are amazingly people who have met me that don't particularly like me. I don't know what's wrong with them either. But if someone's perception of you was actual truth, like absolute truth about yourself, then everyone had the same perception of you. And that just doesn't exist because it's on the person perceiving, not the person receiving. Okay? Should statements. Ooh, these are so tricky, right? I should be more positive. I shouldn't cry so much. I should want to get out with people. I shouldn't blah, 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 right? Whatever nonsense your brain is trying to convince you, it's going to sound like I should, I have to, or I need to. You are not a robot. You're human. You're going to go through a lot. There is no should when it comes to survival, when it comes to happiness, when it comes to balance, when it comes to groundedness, right? Those are not obligatory emotions. And anytime you're using a should, a need to, or have to, those are obligatory statements, right? They're not statements that you believe that you're maybe capable or that you believe that you actually want to do. They're more like negative aspirational, right? And what I mean by that is they're aspirational in like, oh, I should go run 3 miles. But it's in a negative connotation because you're using it against yourself. Emotional reasoning. So the example would be, I feel hopeless. So that must mean there's no hope, right? Now, I will always tell you, your feelings are valid, but they're not factual, right? They're pieces of information. They're like warning bells or a dashboard indicator light, just to let you know there's something going on with you, but they're not fact, right? You can feel hopeless and still have hope, right? Like I want you to take a moment to just think about the difference. You can feel hopeless, right? That's a feeling. It's a very valid feeling. It's an understandable feeling. Many, many people in a similar situation would likely feel hopeless. But that does not mean you are devoid of hope. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing here? Why would you be listening to a podcast to improve your mental and emotional health during infertility and IVF? Why would you be exploring or pursuing IVF if you had no hope? You can feel hopeless and still have hope. And the last example would be overgeneralization. My last transfer failed, so this one will too. Every cycle is its own thing. Every single cycle. And your RE will tell you this. When you do get pregnant, your OBGYN will tell this, like there's every pregnancy is different, every delivery is different, every cycle is different, all of that. Just because something happened once doesn't mean it is your forever pattern. Okay? So we went through all of these. I want to give you an example of how you can identify these cognitive distortions. First and foremost is always going to be pause. Pause and get curious. I want you to ask yourself, what is the story my brain is trying to tell me right now? Because it feels like it's trying to be kind of a jerk. So maybe it's not true. Maybe it's one of these cognitive distortions that Emily's talked about. Look for extremes. Watch for words like always, never, should, can't, everyone, no one. Those are speaking in extremes, which are forms of cognitive distortions. Name it. Name it. Once you spot it, call it out. That's catastrophizing. Oh, I think I'm doing some all or nothing black and white thinking, right? Oh, I labeled myself as a horrible friend because I don't really want to go to my friend's baby shower because I'm still in the thick of it with IVF, right? All of those are cognitive distortions. You just call it out, right? You're not going to catch every one of those. I want my perfectionist to kind of put your hackles down. You don't have to monitor every single thought that comes through your head to identify every single cognitive distortion. It's impossible. You wouldn't get anything done. And you'd probably be pretty annoyed with yourself very quickly because they happen so quickly, right? We're just looking for a percentage, a portion of time where you can identify ones where it's like, oh, now I see, right? We're not looking for perfection. Again, we're not doing all or nothing. But if you could interrupt the pattern, even a quarter or a third or half of the time, I want you to think about how free and how easy you will get to feel. Not easy as in like this process is easy, but the feeling of ease, like you're moving through this without having to fight yourself through the process. Okay, so we're going to call them out. We're going to do all of those ways that you can identify those cognitive distortions, and then we're going to start to unravel them. And the first one is going to be compassion related, right? Talk back with kindness. You can ask yourself, sometimes I will ask myself, is that the whole truth? Like, is there a different way that I can look at this? Right? And maybe there's not. Maybe I'm so flooded or so overstimulated or something like that where I can't look past it. But at least I'm asking myself the question, right? Maybe, just maybe I'm wrong about what I'm thinking, and that I could think about this in a different way, a less painful way. Doesn't make either one of them any or less true than the other. It just means that I don't have to hold on to hurt or pain that I don't need to, okay? So another question you could ask yourself is, what would I say to a friend who felt this way, who is coming to me with this kind of cognitive distortions? The second way is to zoom out. What else could be true? What could I be wrong about, right? Things like that. As always, I want you to get grounded, move your body, breathe, place your hand on your chest. Just letting your nervous system settle down. Number one, that's going to allow you more opportunity to identify the cognitive distortions. And number two, you're just going to feel better because you're not in this constant state of hyper arousal or hyperstimulation or anything like that. You actually get to feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more settled. And then, of course, you can ask for support because I'm here. You got the podcasts, you've got communities of people on Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms. I can be your coach. You can go to therapy or pursue therapy, things like that. There are many, many outlets for support that you can access, and I want you to access them. Okay, so final thought, cognitive distortions are totally normal. They're human. Doesn't mean you're broken. But now that you can see them, now you have the language to describe them and to understand them. Now you have tools. Okay? Most importantly, and this is something that cannot be glossed over. You have you, the version of you that's growing, that's healing and learning to be a little bit gentler with that beautiful, busy brain of yours. So until next time, be kind to yourself. Please, 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 please be kind to yourself. You don't have to love yourself. You don't have to bathe in the warmth of the embrace of your own body and your own mind. No, you could just be kind. Let's just start there. Just don't be a jerk to yourself. Okay? You're doing an amazing job even when it doesn't feel like it. Okay? Especially then, actually. That's usually when you're doing your best work, is when it doesn't feel like it. All right? So have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.